Good morning and thank you for joining us. For State of Texas, I'm Josh Hinkle. With just a few days to go before the election, Donald Trump's lead in the polls is growing in Texas. And an NBC News poll shows Trump leading Hillary Clinton by 9 points. That's a wider margin than several earlier polls. One reason for the difference? This poll focused only on people likely to vote in the election, not the larger universe of registered voters. One Texas congressman is causing controversy for his prediction on what will happen if voters choose Hillary Clinton for president. Austin Republican Michael McCall went on Fox News earlier this week to say Clinton could be impeached because of ongoing investigations into her emails.
This investigation will continue whether she wins or not, but assuming she wins and the investigation goes forward and it looks like an indictment is pending, at that point in time under the Constitution, the House of Representatives would engage in an impeachment trial. It would go to the Senate, and impeachment proceedings and removal would take place.
Talk of impeachment proceedings just days before the election brought strong responses from Clinton's supporters, including President Obama. He spoke at a campaign rally in North Carolina.
You've got some Republicans in Congress who are already suggesting they will impeach Hillary. She hasn't even been elected yet. It doesn't matter what evidence, they'll find something. That's what they're saying already. How does our democracy function like that?
That's a question a lot of people have as they look beyond Election Day. And for some perspective, we go to our experts. Brandi Grissom is from the Austin Bureau Chief of the Dallas Morning News. And we've got Ross Ramsey from the Texas Tribune. Welcome, everyone.
Thank you. Good morning.
What do you think about that soundbite? I mean, is impeachment for Hillary, if she gets elected, is that actually something that could happen?
You know, the war is over, the war is beginning. You know, this is one of those things where you look at, this has obviously been a really contentious election for 18 months. And, you know, if anybody thinks it's going to end on November 8th, I'd love to see their evidence. I think, you know, we're going to start the next phase of this on November 9th. Voters seem to be, in their way, supporting constant contention.
And clearly, Michael McCall, I mean, people say that he has another motive, maybe possibly running for Senate against Ted Cruz. I mean, a Texas congressman, what does that say, saying something like this?
I think there are a lot of folks who are looking toward those future races, maybe just wanting this one to be over and thinking about the next one.
Right.
But, you know, we're also Beto O'Rourke, a Democrat from El Paso congressman, said this morning that he's thinking about running for Senate as well. And so, you know, people are trying to position themselves for what's next in the future, especially in this environment where it's so divided, trying to stake their territory.
What's kind of your take as we're just, you know, a couple of days away from the election?
You know, we did some polling. The University of Texas Tribune poll ended right before early voting started. So a couple of things have happened. You know, but you know, what was interesting in those numbers was that it was a close race. Trump is ahead in Texas. He's not ahead by the traditional, you know, double percentage point lead that Republicans are. And when you ask his voters, why are you voting for Donald Trump? Do you want your candidate to be president, or are you voting against the other candidate? 53% of his voters don't want Hillary Clinton to be president. It's sort of weak support for Trump and strong opposition to the Democrat. So, you know, I think a lot of Republicans, I think what that tells you is a lot of Republicans are, I'm a Republican, but I'm not sure about this guy, but I am sure about the opposition.
And I saw the new NBC News poll came out, and it said 9% lead for Trump, which you said is not the double digits we expect. What do you read out of that?
Well, it's all going to depend really on turnout and who we see coming to the polls, and if more people in Texas, we're always seeing a huge spike in the polls and early voting. So if that trend continues, that'll really tell us a lot about what's going to happen.
And what's election night going to be like for your outlet?
Well, you know, we're just going to, obviously we're watching Texas and watching to see what happens in Texas. In some ways we have, you know, it's important to the candidates on the thing, but in terms of changing the slate of the legislature or changing the direction of some statewide office, the Texas part of the election is really not a major election. This isn't going to be a big game changer. The top of the ballot is, of course, what everybody's been talking about for 18 months and what we've all been talking about. And we're going to be watching that and seeing what happens in Texas. Do the traditional Republican counties stay Republican in the same strength, you know, velocity, you know, intensity that they have for Trump? And where do we see changes? The biggest county in the state is Harris County, and Obama and Romney were less than 1,000 points apart when that race ended. So that's a county that's on the bubble. Is that going to be a red county or a blue one, and by how much? Dallas County's been blue lately. Tarrant County's remained very, very red. Fort Bend County is on the bubble. There's some things around the state like that. Travis County, of course, has always been the blueberry and the tomato soup.
Right. You know, and earlier we were talking about that it seems like the presidential race has really overshadowed so much other news, and especially political news. I feel like people aren't talking about it as much because we're this close to the election. After this, we've got the legislative session here in Texas, and I know that, you know, we're kind of looking ahead to that. And I read the article that you had out about the prison system. Can you kind of tell our viewers a little bit about what you were trying to put out there?
Sure. So what we discovered is that the Texas juvenile justice system here in Texas over the past year or so has seen a sort of shocking rise in the number of youths who are inmates in their facilities. And the system is really trying to keep up with that increase, as they've undergone also a huge budget decrease over recent years. And what some advocates are worried about is that the oversight of the youths and the conditions in which they are living is suffering as a result. What we found is that there was one corrections officer who was arrested and charged with sexually assaulting one youth in a facility, and investigators have found that there are allegations that he molested a number of youths over his employment there. And what's more is that we also discovered that there was a history in this guy's background where he had worked at the adult prison system and had some issues there too. And the Juvenile Justice Department was aware of those issues and yet continued him to allow working with youths. So concerns about that as we head into the legislative session and what lawmakers will do in response.
Yeah, it seems like there's a lot of talk of, from stories like that and others. You know, we've got the CPS crisis, also the need for reforms in some of these government agencies. What are you kind of seeing as some of the other big things that are going to get talk in the legislative session?
You've got these big operational things, like you say. You know, Charles Smith is the executive commissioner at the Health and Human Services Commission, has said that to get CPS in line, he needs I think his phrase was north of $400 million and 1,300 employees. There are a lot of pressures like that on the legislature and on the budget. At the same time, they're going to have a little bit less money coming in. It's not a bad time, but Controller Glenn Hager has said you're not going to have as much money rolling in this time as you did last time. So they're going to have to decide whether to get into the rainy day fund. They're going to have to decide what to do with some priorities from Greg Abbott, Dan Patrick, and Joe Strauss, who variously won a convention of states. This is Greg Abbott, to amend the U.S. Constitution. Joe Strauss would like to concentrate on school finance. Dan Patrick has said, I want to concentrate on school choice, education savings accounts, things like that, property tax relief, and some other things. So, you know, it looks like a fairly contentious legislative session, and it looks like a lot of the things that they're going to be working on are things that they didn't choose to work on, but that chose them.
When you have such a divisive election season, you know, and then you go into something where there is the need to create new policy, is it more difficult for the two parties to agree on some solutions at that point when we get to the legislative session?
I think one of the things that's going to be overshadowing the legislative session is another sort of divisive issue that we're seeing on the national as well as the state level, and that is transgender bathrooms.
Right.
That is a huge priority that Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick has said that he wants to see here in Texas, a bill similar to the one in North Carolina that bans transgender people from using the restrooms that align with their gender. And so that is a bill that many in the business community here in Texas really strongly oppose because they're worried about the economic fallout of legislation like that, such as they've seen in North Carolina. And so what you're seeing set up is a really possibly acrimonious battle between conservatives who want the support of the business community and those who are wanting to go along with the conservatives who really support this bill. It could be a really bloody battle.
Right. You're going to have a lot of Texans watching North Carolina to see what happens to the governor's election there, to see what happens in the Senate election there. To some extent, those elections are referendums on just this issue. And as Brandi said, you know, it's not so much the Democrats are over here and the Republicans are over there as some Republicans are over here, which is where their voters are. Patrick is where the voters are in our poll. And some of them are over here on economic development issues that have been dear to the Republican Party and that are kind of setting the tone in North Carolina. So a little bit caught between and betwixt.
All right, we'll come back to you guys in just a moment, but a lot of people are looking for someone to blame for the tone of this year's campaign, but some folks are turning the focus on the way many of us choose to get the news, how social media is changing your view of the campaign. First, though, a new plan for fixing the crisis at Child Protective Services, how new recommendations could change the way Texas protects children in danger. Experts chosen by a federal judge to overhaul the troubled Texas foster care system recommend a series of reforms. The report calls for a requirement for caseworkers to meet with children in private. It also recommends the state phase out foster groups' homes and mandate that younger children be placed in family-like settings. The report also looked at ways to keep Child Protective Services caseworkers on the job. One key recommendation would put a cap on the number of cases assigned to each caseworker. The report recommends a limit between 14 and 17 cases. It also calls for controlling the load on newly hired caseworkers in the first 9 months on the job. Working conditions and pay are big obstacles to keeping caseworkers. State leaders put in an emergency plan to hire and train more caseworkers. Right now, starting take-home pay is around $24,000 a year. The low pay and tough working conditions lead an average of 4 CPS workers to quit every day. Commissioner Hank Whitman presented a plan to state lawmakers to train and hire 550 new caseworkers. The total cost is close to $60 million. But some members of the Senate Finance Committee are questioning whether the agency is effectively using its money. The recommendations come as a response to U.S. District Judge Janice Jack's ruling that the state's foster care system is unconstitutionally flawed. Judge Jack ordered reforms after finding that the Texas system often leaves children worse off than when they entered the system. A lot of people believe this year's election may be the most vicious and vile campaign ever. But is the problem the way many of us choose to get the news? We'll look at how social media is changing campaigns. There's no question that this year's race for the White House has been one of the most talked about elections in history. Scandals and controversy from both sides of the aisle often push aside talk of the issues. And as Anna Wiernicki shows us, some people believe social media may be to blame.
We've seen them battle it out on stage.
He goes around with crocodile tears about how terrible it is.
You talk, but you don't get anything done.
But perhaps the most important battle of this election is online.
Twitter is the most inexpensive way to reach people. Literally, all you need is a phone, which you already have.
Social media analyst Michael David says the only way to the White House is now through platforms like Facebook and Twitter. That's where 44% of American adults say they receive their election information, according to a study by the Pew Research Center.
Why does he do these things? Who acts like this? And I'll tell you who, a bully. That's who.
Hillary Clinton has criticized her opponent's outspoken language on Twitter, calling Trump's tweets inappropriate and unpresidential.
It's a net gain.
But it's that same language that David says led to Trump's success in the primaries.
Social media is going to favor the outspoken, and Trump has leveraged that. And he jumped out way ahead of everyone else early in the election without spending that much money.
David says social media can also be dangerous for politicians. Earlier this week, Texas Agriculture Commissioner Sid Miller, a Trump supporter, posted a tweet calling Hillary Clinton the C word. Miller quickly deleted the vulgar tweet and has since apologized for it, blaming it on a staffer.
The lesson of this election is manage it wisely, but I don't see how you win an election without it.
Anna Wiernicki, KXAN News.
Some Texas Democrats are trying to turn anger over Sid Miller's vulgar tweet into action at the polls. A group of Democratic women held a rally in Austin after the tweet went out. They say Texas women should use their votes to send a message.
I would like to see women say enough is enough. This has gone too far. We have higher standards. We will be respected and we will vote. We called Miller about the incident. He says the person responsible for the tweet has been, quote,
dealt with, although he wouldn't specify how. We're joined now by our roundtable again, Brandi Grissom from the Dallas Morning News and Ross Ramsey from the Texas Tribune. What do you think about that tweet?
It was shocking, to say the least. I think sort of the most troubling part of the whole situation was how Miller dealt with it afterward. Initially, it was that he had been hacked, right. And then there was a quick turnaround to say, "Oh no, it was some staffer who didn't pay attention to what he was doing." And so the question becomes, how much responsibility does a public official take for a major gaffe like that?
Mm-hmm. And what did you think?
It was, like she said, it was shocking, but it was also one of a pattern. Sid Miller has been in this social media box a number of times since he took office in January of 15. And a staffer did this one and I did this one. And, at some point it's just like, you get a handle on your account. This has been, this isn't the first gaffe. This wasn't one of those things where you go, oh golly, that could have happened to anybody. It's like, if you said this happened to name the official, most of us would have said, oh, it's got to be Sid Miller.
Some people shouldn't have social media accounts. Got to be responsible with it, right? No, so, how do things like that, when you have a statewide elected official, how does that hurt the rest of the party? I mean, are Republicans going to see any kind of, damage because of something like that, and other things that have come out that have been controversial, like everything with Donald Trump and the things that he said back with Billy Bush, those kind of things?
And I think what you're seeing from the public is really just they're weary of this whole sort of degradation of political talk, and I think that folks see it coming from both sides, from both Republicans and Democrats, and they're just tired of it and they want it to be over. I don't know if you've been in a grocery store recently or talked to anyone in the general public about this election, but pretty much everyone is just ready for it to be over. And I think this is just adding to that sense of, please let it be November 9th already.
Grocery stores where you talk to people about the election?
All the time.
Does this really, change things for the women electorate? Does this, change their view of?
It's accentuated this year because you have a guy at the top of the Republican ticket who has been accused of sexual assault, who has been accused of, caught saying all kinds of things. You've got issues like this, and you've got a female candidate on the other side, and so it attenuates the situation. I think Brandi's right. I think a lot of voters just think this whole election has been kind of gross, and that's descended into this kind of language and a conversation about a bunch of things that really, in some ways don't really involve the presidency. It's like, why aren't you talking about this or this or this instead of that and that and that? I think a lot of people are going to be glad to see Tuesday come and go.
Is this part of the campaign that we've seen such, I guess, violent rhetoric? Is it, kind of an anomaly, or are we going to start seeing more and more of this as we go forward in future elections?
I think it goes back to what we were talking about earlier, and how we began this part of the show talking about, the impeachment of Hillary Clinton going forward. I mean, how do we as a country come together and heal after this? I think that will, the tone of that healing, and if it occurs, will set the tone for whatever happens next. And if people really truly are tired of this sort of rhetoric that we're hearing and the baseness of it, will they push for change? And that comes from people going into voting and telling their representatives what they want to see.
Mm-hmm. What are your thoughts?
Well, I think that's right. I think, this depends on voters. Whatever you think about politicians, they pay attention to voters, and they're hypersensitive to it. And when voters say stop, they'll stop. Voters aren't saying stop right now. We periodically go through, periods of nasty politics.
And when will we start seeing, campaigns for the next statewide races in 2 years start shaping up?
Right now.
Last Tuesday.
Yeah.
Right. When you see people like, Michael McCall talking about maybe I'll run against Ted Cruz, Joaquin Castro saying maybe I'll run against Ted Cruz, Beto O'Rourke saying maybe I'll run against a U.S. senator. He didn't specify.
That's right.
People are already talking about 2018. A lot of statewide officials in Texas are awfully glad they're not on the ballot this year. They're all Republicans, and this isn't, the best year to be a Republican. If either Trump or Clinton wins, it's going to be a very interesting midterm election in 2018. And a lot of people who know they're going to be in that election or who hope to be in that election are fastening their seatbelts already.
You think anyone's particularly in danger? that holds office right now?
I don't know that we know anyone yet who's in particular danger.
You know, the two I would point to are probably
problems.
the Attorney General, Ken Paxton, depending on how the criminal and civil fraud charges against him go. Those have not been resolved, but he either comes out of this a hero or he comes out of this a goat. You know, that's kind of how those work. Sid Miller has, you know, built the case for an opponent. Nobody's jumped up yet. I don't know that anybody will beat him, but, you know, he's certainly done everything an opponent would hope he would do. So, you know, if you were putting together a campaign and you were a Democrat and you were trying to bust in, I think those are the two weak spots in the wall.
You have a big highlight reel to go through on campaign ads there.
Right, a lot of Twitter accounts to read.
There's so much time between now and then, though, and you can already see, you know, our lawmakers setting themselves up. If you look at especially Dan Patrick's campaign for the transgender bathroom bill, and Governor Abbott setting up his agenda for the legislative session with talk about ethics reform and the Convention of the States, that's what they're doing, is getting ready for the next election.
Great. It's been great having you here. Thank you so much. And thank you for joining us for State of Texas. You can join us every Sunday morning at 8:30 right before Meet the Press. Have a great day.